All right, and that was a little bit of a orchestral reprise for some of
Feedback. It's all
those.
on my end. It's all on my end. I'm taking care of it.
Ah, well, it sounded great. I thought maybe the Boston Pops had just moved into Mark's basement with him. Yeah.
Well, I just, last minute thing. You don't know. Are we going to use a Skype? Are we going to use a Zoom? Are we going to use StreamYards? And then you said that computer, it's this computer, and that had
Yeah.
Windows open, whatever.
Well,
All part of
welcome to our StreamYard here, produced by Neighborhood News Studio with the great Andy DeBala and Aaron Adler working the boards. And we are great to have you, Mark. Guys, Mark Kulacz of Housatonic Live is with us tonight. And, I guess this is a good time to let everybody know that you've agreed to come back every 2 weeks from alternate Wednesdays and give us some updates. And I tell you, guys, I watch Mark, and I've found that to me, Mark's research is right at the cutting edge of what we need to know. And so I'm really grateful that you've been able to make some time for us, Mark. And, great. Congratulations on your good work. Welcome back. One more thing. The last time you were on the show was the time that I got my second YouTube strike and they took my channel down.
Oh, okay. Well,
you know why?
We're going to dance. We'll dance a little bit. We'll be careful of trigger words.
So we are on the backup channel tonight, just to try to be a little bit safe. But I am working on a way that we can do interviews without worrying about this, and that's a project I've been working on in my mind, and maybe next week or in a couple of weeks we'll have a chance to try it out, because if we can avoid the censors, wouldn't that be great?
Well, it's I believe it is part of the game right now. Unfortunately, the biggest reach and the best search engines are still on YouTube. Yeah. So we have to balance, working on the YouTube platform and using some other platforms for other people to be able to see things, which YouTube flags. And hopefully, eventually we will get to a different phase, I guess, where we don't have to play this particular game anymore. It's unfortunate. People, it's unfortunate. We actually have Americans, and this is not meant to be any slander against a foreign nation, foreign superpower of China. But when some people are actually looking at using possibly even partially state-sponsored media platforms in China to get around U.S. censorship, we have a problem. Again, no offense to China. I'm not going to get into that particular discussion, but the word on the street would bet it usually should be the other way. Usually is the other way around, right? So we have some work to do.
So many things are changing, everything seems to be upside down and not getting any better. Well, let's move into our first topic tonight. Andy, you want to go ahead and play that clip? It's a clip that both Mark and I noted today, and Mark put it up on his channel, Housatonic Live too. I just passed it along on Twitter, but let's make sure that we all can enjoy or if that's the right word for it, what really an incredible disclosure that's come out on this October 29th, 2019. Think of that date, October 29th, 2019 video. And go ahead, Andy, let's have it.
Why don't we blow this system up? I mean, obviously we can't just turn off the spigot on the system we have and then say, hey, everyone in the world should get this new vaccine we haven't given to anyone yet. But there must be some way that we grow vaccines mostly in eggs, the way we did in 1947.
In order to make the transition from getting out of the tried and true egg growing, which we know gives us results that can be, beneficial. I mean, we've done well with that, to something that has to be much better. You have to prove that this works. And then you've got to go through all of the clinical trials, phase 1s, phase 2s, phase 3, and then show that this particular product is going to be good over a period of years. That alone, if it works perfectly, is going to take a decade.
There might be a need or even an urgent call for an entity
Right.
of excitement out there that's completely disruptive, that's not beholden to bureaucratic strings and processes.
So we really do have a problem of how the world perceives influenza, and it's going to be very difficult to change that unless you do it from within and say, I don't care what your perception is, we're going to address the problem in a disruptive way and in an iterative way, because you do need both.
But it is not too crazy to think that an outbreak of a novel avian virus could occur in China somewhere. We could get the RNA sequence from that, beam it to a number of regional centers, if not local, if not even in your home at some point, and print those vaccines on a patch and self-administer.
And that's it. Now,
A lot to unpack there.
I have a lot of problems with what we just heard, but let's let you you can have the first go. What do you think?
Well, again, the timing, late October 2019. Many have said that that event 201 is a sign of some planned conspiracy. That was mid-October, I think October 18th, 2001. So this isn't long after that. And a lot of things that they've talked about there, matter of fact, just happened to transpire not long after that meeting. That's the Milken Institute. I mean, I just wrote down like 10 things. They're talking a lot about blowing it up, changing the way vaccines are, changing the way, how would you say, disease preventative medicine is developed and tested, getting from an older method, a tried and true method, as Fauci called it, which is he used the term egg growing, and that means actually using like chicken eggs,
Yeah.
Or something else which grows rapidly as a way to be able to grow the virus or whatever else it is would be used in the injections that they want to make, and how to get it to the next phase, and really take a step back and consider how determined and how confident the people were in what they wanted to get to. There didn't seem to be a lot of speculation. It wasn't some pie in the sky. We have this old method of making this medicine, and we want to get to something new, which would be like this. It really sounded like they were very sure what they had and what they wanted to start to produce and get people to start to adhere to. They just needed some event. Now they use that word, novel avian virus. It's a picky. Bats aren't really birds, right? I mean, they're mammals, they're winged mammals, but either way, it is a novel virus. That is, that's the official line here that broke out and spread, and it created the excitement, as the Dr. Bright had mentioned, and a exceptional situation which allowed for the regardless of perception, the push of this new medicine, which you have to admit, John, they took this new generation of medicine, which supposedly had never been really fathomed before, producing at scale. Not only had it some early qualifications done, like in early 2020, but the factories were up and running very fast. Now, I'm not a factory expert, although I do come from an industrial city. It takes time to design a factory, to get it up and running, staff it. There's work permits, there's environmental regulations, there's obviously quality control, packaging, all of that stuff. And that all happened very rapidly, almost as if it was part of the plan, if you will. So there's a lot of premeditation suggested in that video. It's a terrifying amount, in my opinion. And it was actually brought to my attention by some other people, I think maybe on TikTok even, I don't know. But it's going viral. if you don't mind my saying so. What's your initial impression about it, John?
Well, to me, the shock is to have Dr. Fauci there admitting that we should be going through all of these, third level trials, and that it
Mhm.
takes a long time to get through all of these trials. And
Yes.
well, yeah, that's right. Even if you abandon the chicken and the egg, as some type of old technology that we don't do that no more. That's grade school. Wait till you see what we do now. We've
Mhm.
got mRNA, and but if you have something that's stellar and wonderful and has all this promise, as Dr. Fauci said himself, you have to go through the trials.
Yes.
You know, you can't be a 33rd degree Mason unless you go through the trials. You know, everything has to go through the trials. If you don't go through the trials, then you haven't proven your case. Um, why is it that we had to go to the emergency use authorization? I think that was caused by somebody that we now call a snow job county man.
Well, there's Snow Job County man, Snohomish County man, who was the what America's patient zero, at least according to the official narrative, is referred to. And they actually use the word county man. They won't even say the name of the town or the city because, well, I'm not sure if the person actually exists. So it's just a great way to be able to cloak this person, in a little bit more mystery and make it harder to identify them. Now, there's one person on that, and you mentioned emergency use authorization, or the
Yeah,
EUA, as many know it as, and that is a provision, set of laws from that the Food and Drug Administration has access to allow them to provide emergency use authorization for a new and experimental type of medicine, should there be some situation which you weigh the cost and the benefits would potentially merit it. And at the surface level, I think everything should have some common sense, right? If there's some exceptional situation and there's some unique opportunity to deal with it, people should be able to use a little bit of common sense. Either way, what's important to note is that emergency use authorization was initially drafted in 2014-15, and it was not made into law until 2016. It's a really big deal on how that became law, how that opportunity for the FDA to do an EUA became a reality. Those laws were passed at the I think it was December of 2016. So Biden was a vice president and very influential in that. I'm not sure how close of a margin it was when it passed House, Senate, and became law. Most of that had been drafted 2014 and 2015. For whatever reason, they didn't pass it until just before Trump became president. Now, the person who ran the FDA for 7 years under President Obama, without a whole lot of attention, I guess, drawn to them, is a Dr. Margaret or Peggy Hamburg. And although I don't know if she personally wrote that emergency use authorization, she certainly was instrumental in it. And her very first day as an FDA commissioner, or maybe it was the second day, whatever. The point is that she gave a speech saying that one of the biggest challenges is the new era of personalized medicine, which really means gene therapy. And well, guess what? After she stepped down a year later, Trump won, which I believe was a shock to everyone. And then the EUA became possible. Now, Margaret Hamburg was in that video, John, that you just played.
Mm.
She was on the side. She got plenty of time to talk. Okay. It's not that she wasn't allowed to speak or they didn't ask her questions. It was about balance. I think Fauci, of course, got the most time of anyone on that board. But the point is that she's right there. She's there next to them. The same person whose FDA really enabled the EUA, which remarkably was needed the moment it passed. Well, a couple of years afterwards, at least, because of the unforeseen, what do they call it? Novel coronavirus, which just happened to occur exactly as they predicted.
That was an
And
excitement, as I understand it. Right?
excitement.
That
Yes,
was
excitement.
it's Dr. And I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Bright too, but let's look in who Dr. Peggy Hamber. I guess she's a doctor, and she
Yes.
was on the panel
Yes.
with Dr. Fauci that we just saw.
Yes.
So she's sitting there in October of 2019 as the director, as the commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. No, she was the commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration from 2009 to
Correct.
April 2015.
Correct. That's
So
7 years.
she's sitting there basically as a revolving door. I mean, she's like a human revolving door. Is she not sitting there or is she now with the government now? What does she do next?
It's on her Wikipedia page. She's with some global health organization right now. It's not the WHO. It's something else, some other medicine group. There's so many, we can't even keep track of them. But who is she? Well, she first came to my attention because she was one of several people that were seen frequently in Congress in 2000 and 2001 regarding new and emerging concerns about bioterrorism and the possibility that there could be a large-scale bioterror attack on a major U.S. metropolitan center. And it would be, well, obviously that would be a terrible thing, but one of the problems that she and others were highlighting with that terrible scenario, which I guess there was just no way to stop it. So they only want to talk about how do you respond to it. No way to be able to stop this. Don't get me started on that. Well, you know what? We're going to need a new type of medicine to inject people with because we just won't be able to have enough in our stockpiles. We're going to need a new type of medicine, probably getting away from this whole egg-based thing that we can print on demand just in case, this unstoppable bioterror event were to occur. She was in Congress in August 2001, sitting next to, you won't even believe it, Dr. Jerome Hauer, who is Giuliani's emergency preparedness planner, and was the main person who was on TV news with Peter Jennings on the night of September 11th, 2001, talking about how areas in Lower Manhattan were being cordoned off and potential new building collapses, et cetera, et cetera.
Peggy Hamburg was on?
The person who she was sitting next to, matter of fact, during those hearings in August of 2001, was one of the main people on television that day. Very close. But let's talk about her career a little bit more. All right. Yeah. Look, I mean, sometimes good people just wind up being at a bad place at a bad time. It happens. Doesn't mean you're at all, necessarily responsible for that. She got her, I don't know where she got her doctorate, but as a young scientist, she was working almost immediately, started working in Dr. Anthony Fauci's lab, I think from the time that she was in her late 20s in the AIDS trials in New York City. Her father was someone who is, I guess, a legend in the neo-progressive globalist circles, a fellow named Dr. David Hamburg. Now, I don't know if that name means much to you. It didn't mean much to me. No. Not shunning his accomplishments, but I just was unfamiliar with the name. And David Hamburg was the president of the Carnegie Institute or Association for 15 years.
Ooh.
He was also the top.
Wait a minute. The president of the Carnegie Institute?
Yes.
That means he's a huge, that's huge.
He was also on a first name basis with Mikhail Gorbachev regarding the removal of nuclear weapons from Russia in the 1980s. And oh, by the way, that would have also included Russia getting out of the bioweapons game, possibly trying to find a new place or a way to get rid of a whole big stockpile of anthrax.
That is so fascinating to think of Carnegie being involved in
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Carnegie Institute, I think, is I'm not an expert on it, but I'm finding more intriguing connections to the Carnegie Institute than Rockefeller necessarily.
By,
Um,
by the way, just to throw
please.
this in there, since David Underdown is here, and he's such a great researcher, and he
Oh,
says
he rocks.
that Margaret Hamburger's husband is in the Mercer. Uh,
Yes.
I don't see the
Yes. As a matter of fact, I think Margaret Hamburg's husband's father possibly created the first hedge fund. I don't know what the name is. I wrote down some notes. At some point, it's like you don't even know where to go, right?
Wait a minute. He was a psychiatrist.
He was a psychiatrist.
David Allen Hamburg was a American psychiatrist,
Yeah.
president of the Carnegie Corporation. What do psychiatrists do? Well, good psychiatrists try to cure people. But what else could you do with the knowledge of a psychiatrist if you were thinking of, say, manipulating a large population or something like that to try to make them all think the way you want them to? It's a good degree to have if you're in the Carnegie business.
John, that Wikipedia page is deceptively thin. Deceptively thin. There's a 1-hour interview of him from it's like 1990, I think. And he really starts off saying that his first real area of study was genetics. So he started off in genetics, and that led into like a morphing of genetics, epigenetics, psychology, etc. And then that led to a role that was a combination of being a scientist and this diplomat. And these are, again, he was probably the top individual U.S. citizen working first name basis with Mikhail Gorbachev in the 1990s. It's not many people who can say anything of that magnificent in any one of their family's history. So Margaret Hamburg comes from an extremely visible, I would say notorious family. The Carnegies and the Hamburgs, the Carnegie Institute had a very big role with lots of philanthropy, which has dedicated an enormous sum of their resources to HIV research, AIDS, genetics, personalized medicine, et cetera, et cetera. Not always tested in the most ethical of ways worldwide. Anyways, the video that you played, you started off with, John, it's a great video. Obviously, it shows some type of premeditation. It's actually, isn't it hard to believe that if they were thinking of pulling something like that off, wouldn't you be a little bit more discreet about it? Like have, I don't know, a 12-month blackout or something of that nature?
This is where I think that we're getting to the cutting edge here, because as other people have noticed, there's a number of indications that they had to pull the trigger, maybe a little early on this, that for other reasons. And for me, I tend to look at the financial side of things, and what my well, I'm not an analyst or anything, but I'm just looking at it kind of from let's look at the big picture. And what's certain to me is that the amount of paper out there that represents money exceeds the amount of actual value that's out there by a huge amount. And that the people that have all of these old pieces of paper that are called dollar bills that think that they're worth something are not going to give up their claims just to make life easier for everyone else. So the squeeze comes down on everybody that doesn't have enough money to benefit from what is really a speculative economy at this point. Like if you want to make money, you got to play the poker game. You got to sit down at the table and put your money in and see if you win. You can't just start a business and retire after 30 years like your parents dreamed of.
No,
That's not happening anymore. So where I'm going with this is, it is a huge financial problem that our big banks have, that they can't keep pushing paper back and forth, that the value isn't there, and they keep trying to make more value, and that's squeezing us and squeezing us. And that is why I think they needed to get all those trillions of dollars from Congress. You know, it might not have been that the pharmaceutical companies themselves needed the money. It may have just been that the whole big scheme, the whole big bubble, you know, was going to burst unless they had a big pile of money come in real fast. And they sure did get it, a big pile of money, you know, all whole lots of pieces of paper, but still holding the value that is granted to them by virtue of it having, you know, our national emblems on it, our, you know, our full faith and credit. Uh, so that's, to me, it's an indication. The Paris Accords fell apart. They were going to make a lot of money on the Paris Accords.
Hmm.
You know, as you said, I think that there was a lot of people that just were completely gobsmacked when Trump won. And so what are they going to do about it? Well, they had some plans, and Peter Strzok might have known some of what those plans are, and pulled some of them off the shelf. And certainly this does involve the British as well. It's not possible for me to see that all these things lined up as just pure coincidences, that,
No.
you know, the people in the Batcave just happened to get infected. And it, you know, I won't even go through the Rube Goldberg analysis, you know. Remember those crazy machines that you used to see where you drop the marble here and it goes over there, and the guy kicks the can and it rolls down the hall and it knocks down the thing,
Yeah.
and the pail of water comes falling down, and the
Yeah.
guy gets wet and he kicks the dog. And, you
Yeah.
know, this is the kind of narrative that we're being asked to buy in this crazy situation. All right. I
Well,
shut up.
with all of these new viruses, most of them have very hard to believe narratives. I mean, this one, the narrative on the coronavirus is changing all the time, just based upon evidence, which suggests that if people stop asking questions, it would stop evolving. They just want people to accept some narrative and move on and start taking the medicine. That's it. It's really unfortunate. Yeah, I certainly did not. I still didn't even understand myself the extent of the venture that I'm doing here. It wasn't really my interest to become an epidemiologist and study, you know, pandemics. But the more these things happen, the more it just seems like this. And here's a book I have on Zika right now. I just got this one yesterday.
I knew we'd get to Zika. I wanted to cover from anthrax to Zika with you tonight, brother. So
it is I'm not familiar with the author, although sometimes you can learn a lot about from books from the authors. It was published in 2016. It was published the election year. The official narrative on Zika is that it had been in Asia or Africa, I think, for many, many years, you know, centuries or whatever. And then it leapt, like every year, it leapt from one set of Pacific islands to another set of Pacific islands. And then eventually some rowers from Easter Island or something like that carried it to Brazil for the FIFA World Cup in 2014. And then it started to spread in Brazil from there, because I guess the Brazilians had no natural immunity to it. That's the official narrative. And almost nobody died. They started this thing when this Zika epidemic, they used big words, epidemic, was breaking out. They would say, you know, there were 50,000 cases, 80,000 cases. Cases are up 40% week over week. And I mean, no one wants to have a case, right? But well, what is a case? A case means someone tested positive. Doesn't even mean that they're ill. Ultimately, when you think of like car accidents, right? Most people don't really care how many car accidents there are. They want to know how many people sadly succumb to a fatality in a car accident. Sorry if this is a triggering to someone who might have lost someone. I have a lot of family from the state police in Connecticut, so I don't know. It just doesn't hit me the same way possibly. And the number that perish that way in the United States every year is about I think it's 22,000 or 23,000. It used to be in the 40,000s. It's much lower because of improved auto safety. Now, if someone were to say, well, how dangerous is driving a car in the United States? If they said, well, last year there were 1,700,000 cases. Well, that's okay. How many died, But when it comes to pandemics, they made a transition. They're no longer talking about deaths. They're talking about cases, because the cases numbers, it sounds bigger and it's scarier, even though it is, for the most part, irrelevant. The number of people worldwide that died of Zika in 2015 was 0. And in 16, it was perhaps 6 worldwide. Now, our Congress was shutting down, talking about Zika all day, and what are we going to do? And then 24 hours after the election, when Trump won, the World Health Organization released a statement saying, you know what, Zika is no longer top priority. Even Anthony Fauci, who I think is on the expressway downstairs, was shocked. That's amazing. You can learn a lot, John, about how these things are orchestrated by looking how they're coordinated around U.S. presidential elections. It was supposed to be Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton supposed to be president. Hillary Clinton.
I wasn't going to let her win. She was begging me, and I said, no, Hillary, I'm just not going to let it happen.
Remember, she happened to be a state senator in New York when 9/11 happened.
Yeah, that was an amazing coincidence.
Yeah, another crazy coincidence. And a lot of the increase in visibility of bioterror attacks or concerns happened under the President Bill Clinton administration, and also the family that advocated to get all American children jabbed with measles and everything else you could think of was the Bumpers family from Arkansas, who were very big supporters of the Clintons. Now, what I was going to say here was the thing with Zika. I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about with Zika, but you'll see a lot of the same people involved with Zika as were involved with the SARS 2003 epidemic. You'll see some of the main people that get headlines right now with SARS-CoV-2 were right there, tip of the spear with Zika. And Dr. Fauci and several other people, including some individuals at Moderna, were working with Zika on an mRNA vaccine for it that was probably going to be needed if it went big in the United States. And that never happened. Well, I guess some people lucked out because they got their chance with another novel bird or coronavirus, right? And they got to test an mRNA vaccine on something else. Going back to your notes about that, by the way, note Fauci's words specifically about the disruptive nature and how how important it is to create the perception. Fauci said the mRNA has to be better. It has to be better. Now, of course, we would want it to be better, but I thought the whole point was that it could be made faster, not necessarily that it would be better. But he stresses it has to be better, and this is why it is so important to this medical biopharma cabal that has so powerful right now to get the data that they want, and all the way the data has been collected and it's going to be interpreted has already been bent to ensure that they can make the case that they want to make. It's pretty shocking.
Let me introduce this idea here, because I think it's a fascinating theory that you've come up with, and that basically is that the medicine that is being administered now, and I think people know what we're talking about, is part of the biggest test or human trials that's ever been conducted.
Yeah.
And it is the data that they want more than anything else. There's many speculations out there about, is this uh, a, a, a way to get rid of people? Is it a eugenics program, or is it, is it bioterrorism, or is it bio warfare? Is it one country fighting against another by releasing virulent diseases? And we've been racking our brains trying to figure it out. But your latest theory, which you've been working on for a few weeks, as I understand, goes in a different direction. You're saying, this, what they're really after here is a huge amount of data. Tell me why you came up with this idea and what supports it.
Well, you're familiar with, and I have some shows on this, on the many repulsive instances. I focus on the United States, but it's happened worldwide. Medical experimentation on individuals, going back to World War II and beforehand. Most of those types of tests focus on things which are somehow, one way or another, connected to our genome. Cancer research, well, cancer is really DNA gone bad, if you will. Cells that are replicating poorly, bad copies have been made, an unstoppable condition has been created, and that is considered to be a genetic issue. The issue of bone marrow transplants and organ transplants, many times when those go wrong, it comes down to incompatibilities between DNA, genomes, fighting each other. Of course, there's some of this is involved in blood transfusions, and just all of this new, so much of this new experimental medicine and vaccines in particular seem to have a connection to needing to test stuff that has directly or indirectly related to our genome. And there's a very long history of trying to find individuals in prisons, disabled children, orphan children, immigrants, people in other countries, the poor, the elderly, and using them and giving them this types of medicine without their consent. And if they wanted to kill them, they would have just been killed. But there's this hunger for a large group of people to run these tests on. And it goes back a couple of generations right now. The Germans were using whole camps for this, of prisoners, Christians, Jews, whoever else they could find, I guess. Maybe even their own dissidents. So if there is that much hunger to test on people, and there's never going to be enough, why would you depopulate? Why would you get rid of perfectly good people to test on? Has been my thing. And you can't run these tests on humanized mice or monkeys. They're just not close enough with respect to their genome. They need people. And what happened was, you probably heard of the Human Genome Project, John. I'm assuming you have.
Just vaguely, I'm aware that it happened, and I remember one day they said, "Hey, we cracked it. We got it now."
And they've mapped out much of the human genome, and they've noticed there's been some correlations, some genes with respect to some types of diseases, but it is so much more complex than they imagined. And at some point, if they want their grand vision to be realized, and that is, how do you use viruses to hack into cells and either modify or manipulate how the human genome is functioning? Somehow or another, you need to find 1 billion people or so, and over a long period of time, giving them all different types of medicine, which will play with their genome or cause their cells to express new types of proteins, and then measure everything in their environment you possibly can: temperature, food, activity, what they do professionally, relationships, and try to see what causes what. Really, it's just a huge experiment in data collection, trying to reverse engineer how we work mechanically, our code. And there is a very serious group of individuals, remarkably powerful and wealthy, that do believe that this is their mission from God. This is their faith. This is the ability to conquer Mother Nature and to put ourselves into the driver's seat. It is a religious, spiritual obligation. That humans will never reach their potential. They will never be able to be connected as well as they could be. We'll never be able to explore the planets if we can't figure this out. This is a very, very deep thing. This is far beyond just a simple faith where some people, they have their faith and they want to practice it in peace and so on and leave everyone else alone. This is, it's very thirsty. And a lot of the funding comes from philanthropies, which escape tax laws. And I fear right now, this might be a way that it connects with the monetary thing that you mentioned, is I don't understand what floats the US dollar anymore.
I don't know.
All I can think of is someone like a Henry Kissinger going to the World Bank and saying, you know what? If you support our dollar, we'll inject whatever you want into all of our citizens for 50 years. We'll give you all the data you want. All you need to do is support our dollar and keep letting us buying stuff.
Is there a better explanation?
That's worse than us selling our oil.
I want to know, has anybody got a better explanation than that? And that is a frightening idea. But we've been studying himself, Herr Heinz, here at this channel for 5 years, and we know that he's capable of doing anything like that. And is he, he's just a puppet too. He's working for the, for the real big guys, whoever they are behind the curtain.
Well, I'm gonna throw you over the edge. I'm gonna really push you closer to the edge right now. Someone that he worked with extensively for at least 40 years, when it was also a top advisor to many presidents, was a Dr. Joshua Lederberg, who was a developer of this term eugenics, who actually wrote books, who was inspired and worked directly with Aldous Huxley about using viruses to augment and improve life, to redesign life.
Wait a minute, Aldous Huxley was in on using viruses?
Oh yes, viruses are the gateway. Viruses are the gateway to the human genome.
Huxley. This takes us back to the 30s and the 40s.
Aldous Huxley and Lederberg were very, very much connected. Yes, and Dr. Joshua Lederberg's best friend is Dr. David Hamburg.
And I saw that Andy had put up
whose daughter is Margaret Hamburg.
And David Hamburg wrote a bio of Lederberg.
Yes.
So all of that, oh my, and all this is connected to the huge fountain of money called the Carnegie Institute.
Oh yes, yeah. Now it's an ambitious hypothesis. It's really big and kind of out there, but and I'm willing to augment it however I need to. There's I don't win a prize for being right.
What's this letter here that Andy's come up with here? May 9th, 1971. That's an amazing date. That's 1 month before my dad died. Dr. Henry Kissinger, at the White House. Yeah.
Dr. Hamburg supposedly was an expert on stopping genocides. I don't know if you need to be an expert. No one should want any genocide. Wouldn't that be common sense? But no, he was an expert on stopping genocides. But anyways, good for him. So this is some of this communication. So the Lederberg archives, they're good, but I'm sure that we only see 2% of what's out there. But if you can just find a big letter like that, and Lederberg's was very close with Margaret Hamburg throughout the 1990s. They were frequently side by side. Again, this is an aggressive hypothesis, and I'm sure it needs to be modified. But and look, if this experiment goes wrong, you know what? You weaken and you thin out the Americas, and you enable it for resettlement, which has been the British dream for years. all this land, all this beautiful, this bounty.
Yeah.
It's a win-win, win-win.
That's what I see is the getting rid of the independent thinkers, the frontier mentality, the people that go out and make their own lives. The classic American
Yeah.
is the enemy, is the enemy now. And I see these maps where the people have been asked to identify their culture, their nation, and a large percent of America identifies as German American.
Mhm.
A large percent says Irish American, English American. There's a one large belt in the Appalachian Mountains that stretches down into the deep South that calls themselves American. Everybody else is hyphenated Americans, and this is where our country is being pulled apart. Is that if who needs a hyphen? If you're here, then you're a citizen. You get the benefits, and you have the responsibilities of an American citizen, and you should be glad of that. But they pull us apart. They keep on pulling us this way and that way. But getting back,
But I just want to add one thing to that. It wasn't until I had the opportunity on business travel to go to Europe that it really became clear that while I'm, basically a white guy, that being an American is something that happened between Americans and Europeans. While we may be, for the most part, all Caucasians, and I love the air. The air in Germany, it's beautiful. It's rich. It's humid. There's a lot I like there. I could tell it was not home. Even though I have a lot of German ancestry, whatever. I'm American. It's the new thing that's evolved. And I think you too, John, would consider yourself American. If you were in Ireland right now, I'm sure you'd have a great time, but it would never, I don't think it would feel like home.
Yeah. I would say, don't call me an Irish American. Call me an American Irishman.
There you go.
If you were an immigrant, for instance, I was thinking of that in terms of some of the immigrants of long ago. But I like the idea of getting back to being let's just be Americans. That's what they're taking away from us, and the idea that we are going to farm all this out to these so-called experts. What about Francis Boyle? Have you run into him? He is a guy that speaks as an expert on all this stuff fairly often. He's a professor of law and not of ethics. If not,
I'm not familiar. I just popped open the. No, I'm not familiar. I'm sorry.
No problem. Well, let's go back to Dr. To the one from BARDA that was on that thing, Dr. Bright, Dr. Bright. He was the second speaker after Fauci on the video that we played.
Yes.
And that guy, I looked him up. He is a Rockefeller guy. He was the president of the Rockefeller Institute of Medicine for some time. And this is the other aspect of it. When you say Carnegie, then the next thing that comes to mind is, well, there's Carnegie, with the Cold Spring Harbor, the legacy of eugenics that they're now trying to call euphenics, I guess. But right next door is Rockefeller, and all of the Rockefeller University, the Rockefeller Medicine, Cornelius P. Rhodes of infamy, and the Rockefeller interest in this is clear. When we talk about pressure being put through financial interests, I think of the Rockefellers as kind of the vanguard of the old money that was used, to create Standard Oil, to create the incredible wealth, and to use it in the most vicious way of driving all competition out of business, even using thugs to murder them and get them out of the way. There is okay. We've got Dr. Bright up there testifying on the screen. Anyway, but he was with BARDA, BARDA.
Mhm.
Are you familiar with that organization?
Yes, somewhat. What I do notice immediately is that his doctoral advisor was a Dr. Jacqueline Katz, Katz,
Okay.
who's Australian, and we have a there's a very large number of English, Scottish, and Australian scientists in um, our top medical institutions with access to funding and probably more access to classified material that most Americans don't have. Now, she may have become a U.S. citizen since then. I'm not sure, but there is a very high number of Australian scientists who have been brought in, and Scots as well. As a matter of fact, I've talked a lot about Plum Island, New York. Hopefully, I should call it something else so you don't get flagged. Tomato Island. Okay, there's that Tomato Island Animal Infectious Disease Laboratory. And what I've done shows on this, but I think what people keep missing is that the director of Tomato Island for almost 10 years, for most of the 1990s, was a Dr. Richard Breeze, passed away a few years ago, who was from Scotland. So, the CDC and NIH and the Department of Agriculture they're bringing in individuals. Breeze came in. He worked up in Seattle for like 2 or 3 years as a veterinarian, and then they're like, "Hey, how would you like to run a Tomato Island?" So maybe he was the most qualified person on the planet. All right, I don't know. I suspect he wasn't, because they had lab leaks, including things like Nipah and West Nile, from Tomato Island during the time that he was president. But I would have done his job for half the salary and probably would have done it better. Why are we bringing in? There are some jobs which are, I think, so hot, so risky, are so dangerous that I would rather someone whose entire family and legacy and is rooted in the United States than someone from the outside, even if they are more capable. If they want to bring in consultants from other countries, fine. But non-Americans should not be brought in. And look, this guy's Scott. He's as white as you get. Brought in to run Tomato Island.
Well,
That's deeply frustrating to me. Did any American even get the opportunity? I think the answer is no. I think they went straight to outsource it. And there's many other scientists. Dr. Peter Daszak. Okay, there's a lot of negative things we can say. Regardless, he came to the United States in 1998, and by 1999, he had a top CDC job. How does that happen? How does that happen?
That happens because there's a hidden hand behind the scenes that's manipulating things that we don't get to see, and we have to fight to get glimpses of it. And it's a national tragedy, but the facts are the facts. The truth will set you free, as the Bible says, and I do believe it if we can just keep on pulling. Mark, we've spent an hour together already, and so we're going to have to wrap it up. But I want you to promise me that we'll get back to the anthrax question.
We will,
because you have made some you've done some deep research into what went on with regard to anthrax at the time of 9/11 and those attacks that followed that. Are very controversial because we still don't have a solid narrative that we can all rely upon. But that's not going to stop us. We're going to figure this thing out, Mark, with your help. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity to be a guest. We love your show here. My wife and I listen to you frequently at night. Please keep up the great work, my friend. And thanks for having me on. I look forward to being back in 2 weeks.
All right. And next week in this very, very time slot, the great David Underdown will be here. So, Mark, David, and we'll be back again tomorrow night with Professor Hamamoto. So the fun continues here at McDuff Lives too. Thanks again, Mark. Thanks, everybody. Good night.